Hello everyone, welcome back to Dutchman's. This is a highly anticipated video for me because we finally now get to talk about overwintering these big jalapenos. So these are actually just finished their third growing season. So that means that I've already drug them through two winters, and I'm going to be doing it again for the third time. And I'm going to show you exactly what I do. And one of the things that I didn't do as much before that I'm going to be doing a lot more now is actually pruning these jalapenos, because they're just so big that the way that I overwinter them, I actually wouldn't really be able to do that very well because of how big that they are. So the first thing, you could do it a couple different ways. And the first way is to just prune off all of the growth just down to where there's no foliage, no nothing. All you have left is just sticks in a pot, essentially. And that way you put it into a dormant state by also then putting it in a cold garage or something like that. That'll essentially keep it dormant throughout the growing season. Still not freezing because they can't tolerate frost. 40 or 50 Fahrenheit, around that 5 degrees Celsius range. That'll keep it cool enough to where they won't grow, there won't be any sun for them to photosynthesize to get any growth going, and that'll keep them dormant. Now the second way, which is what I'm going to be doing, is actually leaving some foliage on them and still letting them grow and still letting the energy go down into the roots so that you have a bigger head start for when the growing season, the spring, comes back around. If you have been growing them in ground all growing season, then I would pot them up. So you would have to take as much of the roots as possible and then pot them up into a pot. I also do recommend that you put them in a terracotta pot, which is what these guys are in, because that just helps with proper watering, water management within the soil. It helps to wick away excess moisture, and it just keeps the soil in a perfect state for the trees or the jalapeno plants. I kind of refer to them as trees because of how big that they are. But terracotta is definitely the way to go for things that like to dry out a little bit, and jalapenos would be one of those things. I'm going to show you now how I'm going to prune these, and we're going to start with this big one here, which actually has a rock at the base here, just to prevent it from falling over because it's still loaded down with jalapenos. You might be able to not really be able to tell that very well in the video, but I'll show you here in a minute. It's still loaded in jalapenos. So the height definitely needs to come down. It needs to stay ideally within as close to the parameters of the pot so that I can keep a grow light on it very easily, which is one of the things that I'm going to be doing for overwintering them. Is they're actually going to also go into a south-facing window with a grow light also on them to make sure that there's plenty of sun and light still getting to the jalapeno to keep their energy going. That's just how I prefer to do it. It is probably easier to just cut them back to bare stubs, essentially, just where there's no foliage at all. But I feel like having that foliage still there allows the energy to keep flowing and to give them a head start in spring. So that's why I do it that way. You always want to make sure that you have plenty of root space. This is another reason why I do this, is to make sure that there's plenty of root there. So having all these things, the branch structure, the roots, foliage, having that already be there will give them a head start for the next year. So with all that out of the way, let me show you what I'm going to do next. So as you can see, it's in a fairly large pot, but this rock is keeping it up right now. So it is pretty large. You can see all the jalapenos that are still on it. It's still covered in them. All of which is ideally taken off. Ideally you don't have any more jalapenos on here once you're done. So the first branches that I'm going to take off are Again, kind of keeping the idea where I want to keep it within the parameters of that pot. the first branch that's actually going to be coming off is this one right here. It's a pretty substantial cut, but if you look, it's going to fall pretty perfectly within the parameters here. Or it doesn't have to be exact, but within pretty good parameters if I take this branch out. So that's what I'm going to be doing first. Once you prune this, you want to leave a little bit of a stub there. It's like so. Ooh. I'm pretty apprehensive. This is quite a step. But here we go. That was just that one cut. Look at all those jalapenos on there. Pretty insane. This will also make pretty good cutting material. You can actually grow jalapenos from cuttings, which I'll probably do for some of this as well. For some of the thicker material, I'll try to grow that as a cutting. And that's what we're left with. It's actually not too bad. But from here, I will still have to prune it a little further. So I don't want crossing branches. These branches here are crossing. If you can tell, I already broke one. I want this to be gone anyway. There's a branch here that comes out this direction. That is a lot better. It's growing away from this branch, the branch next to it. So I'm going to take that off. Like so. And you have this pretty big branch still. That's hanging quite far over what I would like it to. Ideally, I leave some type of green here. I don't want it to be completely gone. I'll take this three-pronged area out, like so. And then there's a branch here that's growing up, which is kind of nice because, again, it kind of keeps it condensed within the same area. But this is way too long. So I'll take that off. I can already see some growth points forming, which is good, because that's where I can kind of anticipate where the new growth is going to come out in the spring. So I'll keep some of these branches down here, but this is going to have to come off, like so. And then we have a little bit of growth right here. There's actually a couple branches down below here, so I can take this back a little bit. So the reason why I'm doing this is really to keep it within the boundaries of all the light that I can provide. If you can't get light to all these leaves, then it just might set it back, because whatever is in shade or doesn't get the light, it might end up dying off. It will probably get weaker. It just wouldn't really help the jalapeno out at all. There's a weak branch that's down below here, you can kind of tell. This is very weak, it's not doing much. I don't think that would be worth keeping. I'm going to make a flush cut on this one. And then you have this growth right here, which is a little bit better. Although you can see, which again is what I don't like, is that it's growing in towards the center. Don't like that. But there is a branch right here that's actually pointing outwards, which is a lot better. So let's do that. Prune it down to that. Okay, now this branch here, these two branches will take over as the new leader. This is way too tall. I don't know if you can tell that, it's way too tall. So we'll prune that back. I don't have a whole lot of growth on the actual branch itself, which is kind of unfortunate. But I do have one leaf, and that's what I'll have to just prune it back to and just kind of see what develops. Might happen now, it might happen in spring. Okay, 3 more jalapenos. Make lots of salsa and guacamole. This one is also way too tall. I have a branch down here that I can prune it back to, which I will do. You don't have to prune it back to the final position yet. If you end up seeing, depending on how the jalapeno responds, you can always prune it back further. You can prune it back to other branches and nodes that might form. It doesn't always have to be the final position where you end up pruning them this time. So I'm just going to finish this up and stop talking, and I'll show you the end result. Alright, so this is what I'm left with. I feel pretty good about this. It's all within the parameter of the pot here. This will be easy to keep light on everything. I might end up taking it down a little further, but once you see where I'm going to end up putting them, these are actually going to be easily accessible for the light. Because they're actually going to be down low a little bit, and all this top growth will stick out quite a bit. So this is why it's still a little tall, but not so wide. It'll make sense in the end. So now we're going to go on to the second one. All right, so you're looking at the second jalapeno now. And again, same deal. Lots of jalapenos on it. And they're really tall too. Just way too tall for me to keep it healthy and keep it looking good. So yeah, this is gonna have to come way down. And it's gonna follow a pretty simple, the same type of style as the other one, but I wanted to give you another example. So yeah, in the springtime especially, you'll get these little stubs right here. It didn't sprout. It's not dead, but it didn't sprout. It didn't do anything. I left it on because I was actually using it to prop it up and make it a little bit more straight. I was leaning it up against this, which is why it's so flat on one side, is because it was leaning up against a pillar pretty much all summer. But this can go, this is the type of thing you also want to prune off in springtime as well. This doesn't do anything. It's not going to grow. It doesn't serve a purpose. So let's remove that first. That's gone. Let's start the work on this one. So you always want to, again, keep it fanning outward without any crossing branches in the middle. You don't want any growth to grow towards the middle. That's generally always a bad thing. This branch right here is fine. There's some more branches down here. I might just take this whole top off. I'm just gonna make this a side branch. So I'm gonna leave this side branch here. I'm gonna remove all this top growth. It's gonna really drastically reduce the height of it. I'm actually kind of wondering if that might be too short. I'm gonna prune it off to here first. You can always prune it back more later. It's quite a bit. And I'm gonna prune it back here. There was a hanging branch that was pretty horizontal, which is okay, but there's a vertical branch that can replace the one that I just took off. So that's what the reasoning was behind that. Over here is another really tall one. That's gonna have to come down quite a bit. So there is some branches down below here. I'm gonna take it down to that. Again, I want to keep foliage on here. I don't want to prune it back to nothing. Ideally, there's always a new branch that's there to replace it. There's something there that allows for photosynthesis to happen and energy to go back into the roots. Just like that. Another big top. This might seem pretty drastic, but it's really necessary. If you don't do this and you can't provide light to all these leaves here, your jalapenos is going to get weaker and weaker, and it might just really struggle, and in that case it's only going to get harder for it to bounce back in spring. So there's a branch that goes out to the outside right there, which is good. There's some growth down below here. That's perfect. There's some growth of foliage right there. I can take this tip off, which kind of goes towards the center as well. It's not what I want. This will help direct it outwards, which is better as well. So 2 for 1 right there. I didn't prune these much at all during the summertime. So a lot of it is correcting bad growth. I've got some branches that are growing inwards here, which is never good. I've got 2 branches down below. That's where I'm going to prune it to. Alright, so I'm going to finish up the rest of the pruning and I'll come back with the end result again. Alright, so that's gonna do the pruning for now. I might end up taking some more off if I feel like some might be missing still. I feel like it might need a little bit more taken off than I will. But this is pretty good overall. You want to make sure that you can see the light can get everywhere. That's a pretty big priority here. It's kind of like bonsai really. You're just kind of shaping and, you know, getting branches to grow where you want them to grow and stuff like that. So it's pretty fun. I enjoy it. I might take this branch off too. Just like that. You always see more. Anyway, this is pretty good overall. So let me show you now where I'm gonna put them for the winter. So before we go, this is what we're left with between the 2 jalapenos here. And as you can see, we took a lot off, and it's absolutely necessary to do this. If you don't do this, then they just might get weaker and weaker, and that's only going to make it harder and harder for them to bounce back in spring. So when you do this now, the heavy pruning now, it just allows them to stay healthy, because you can hopefully get enough sunlight to the foliage that is left to keep it healthy and at least possibly grow jalapenos. I have in years past. The first year I still was getting jalapenos, but it's not necessary. Really, the only goal is at this point is to just get them to survive. That's really all you're trying to do. So let's go and put them in their resting spot for the winter now. Alright, so the jalapenos are up here. They'll be here until spring. And as you can see, it's pretty sunny right now, which I know it's not going to last. Being in the Pacific Northwest, it's going to get pretty dark during the winter time. So at that point, once I feel like it's necessary, I'll have a grow light ready for them. I'll face 1 light per jalapeno. And then I'll have more things on this table, more than likely some other peppers that I'm growing. Which follow the same rules. It doesn't have to be a jalapeno. This applies to just about any pepper. I'll leave the lights on for 12 hours. And yeah, that is it. Thankfully, I do have quite a bit of natural sunlight coming in yet, but I know it's just not going to be enough. So if you have a grow light that you can point towards it, I would highly recommend it. Also, if you've watched my early preparation video, then you would know that I've been spraying my jalapenos with neem oil, which that's going to do that one more time, just to make sure that any pests are gone and not going to be on the jalapenos anymore. And I recommend that you do the same. Aphids, spider mites, they are pretty easy to come inside with your outdoor plants. So yeah, I hope you consider overwintering your jalapenos. It is definitely the way to go. I feel like you get a really good yield out of it, and you really just set them ahead by already having an established root system, having an established branch structure. It is really just a way to go, and this applies to really any pepper that you enjoy. So I hope you consider subscribing, and we'll see you in the next one. Tot de volgende keer.